We're going to take a look at erosion by water. So we know that erosion is when the sediments, broken little pieces of rock, get carried away and deposited somewhere else. That's erosion. And water is a main source of erosion. Four things we'll talk about today is erosion by running water, by groundwater, by waves, and by glaciers. So first, running water. How does that cause erosion? I wrote over here running. First off, the picture, I believe it is Grand Canyon. It's this meandering part of the Colorado River. You can see how much it's worn away and eroded all these rocks along the side of the canyon. So running water is a very important agent of erosion. Running water flows from small streams to larger streams, and it's always flowing downhill, so gravity is involved in pulling the water downhill. It can also flow across the ground as runoff from storms. So even if, like here in Carroll Stream, we don't have any major rivers, but when it rains, all that water flows down into the gutters through gravity. It flows across the soil. Gravity pulls it down into like the little creeks and streams and stuff. And when that water is flowing across the ground, it's causing erosion too. Running water directly causes erosion by exerting pressure on rock and sediment, and it indirectly causes erosion by carrying solid pieces of sediment that collide with other rocks. So you can see this river over millions and millions and millions of years has worn away the walls of this canyon to make the amazing Grand Canyon. Groundwater. First off, groundwater is underground water. If you've ever dug a hole or gone to the beach and dug a deep hole in the sand, you know you start to get some water. The deeper down you dig. It's a major source of drinking water and water for crops. People dig wells to get water, but it can also cause underground erosion. So what happens is rainwater falls through the air, soaks into the ground. As it's going down through the ground, it's absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, from the soil. And then that becomes carbonic acid, which dissolves the rock that's underground. Over time, the groundwater can dissolve so much of the rock that a cave system forms. So this is kind of a cool looking cave. And then as the erosion continues, the roof of the cave could collapse, which would cause a sinkhole. Up next, we have waves. How do waves cause erosion and deposition? So this is a cool picture of a coastline. You can see the sand on the beach that comes from rock that's been broken down. You can see this sea arch here. So probably, millions, thousands, millions of years ago, this was all part of a bigger cliff, and then the waves have worn it away and even worn a hole in the cliff to make it a sea arch. Eventually, this part of the arch will fall, and then it'll just be what's called a sea stack. And then eventually that'll get worn away and probably become sand. So when waves crash against a shoreline, they loosen and remove rock material from cliffs and beaches. Waves then pick up this sediment, pulling it back out to sea, moving it along the coast, destroying and creating coastal landforms. So, if you go to a beach year after year, it looks a little bit different every year. And even if you go like weekend to weekend to a beach, it'll look a little bit different. The waves are constantly wearing away and changing and eroding the shoreline. Even when the seas are calm, waves are slowly eroding the coast. But when there's a big storm, that has some serious impact on coastlines. So, big storms can destroy houses and cause flooding for humans and stuff, and that's a bummer. But the big storms, for better or worse, can also weather and erode a shoreline pretty severely. The last one we'll talk about, how do glaciers cause erosion and deposition? So you see these kind of like S lines here, and this isn't just like a road made by humans or something. This is debris that's been kind of carved away by the glaciers. So glaciers erode the land in two ways. One, as glaciers move downhill, the force of moving ice can break, loosen, and lift pieces of bedrock. So as the glacier kind of flows down the hill, it's breaking apart rocks and picking up those loose pieces. This process is known as plucking. Because glaciers are solid ice, they can often pluck out and carry all sizes of sediment, including large boulders. So these huge glaciers, they're not just picking up little pebbles, they pick up huge boulders. And then when the glacier continues to travel, and maybe even melts, it deposits those boulders somewhere else. Um, as the glacier moves, another way that glaciers erode the land, as glaciers move along, these rocks grind against the ground and valley walls, causing erosion by abrasion. So, like along here, you can see, maybe over here is a good spot to look at. You can see how it's kind of like this sharp cliff, and that's carved out by the glacier. All right, so the glacier can move rocks, but it can also carve out the cliff too. All right, so those are some ways that water can erode our earth through running water, groundwater, waves, and glaciers.